Hello, and man, what a awesome opportunity we have today. We have in the house one of the best bass fishermen in the world. The man's won over $1 million in the FLW Tour, Bassmaster Elite Series, and now he's an MLF Pro. That's Major League Fishing. He's finished second at the Bassmasters Classic, the biggest fishing tournament in the world. He's finished third at the Red Crest, their inaugural, basically top tournament in the world for MLF fishing. He's also a state champion, so he's won the state of Alabama, his home state. There's not a whole lot more you can say about this guy in the bass fishing world that just to know that he's one of the top in America. How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, man. Glad to be here. Glad to be hanging out with you. You know, we've been hanging out together a long time, but this is a new one for us, isn't it?
Well, it's definitely a new time just to be able to sit down and talk, not being outside in the environments, I guess I call it.
Yeah.
So just dive us right into this thing. Tell us why fishing is the greatest sport in the world.
Oh man, that's such a good question. It is to me, and I've been like that since I was a kid, and I learned early on that I was maybe a little bit different. You know, I'm different in a lot of ways, but that was one thing that I was a little bit different from a lot of other kids is I never got tired of it. You know, a lot of us enjoyed it, and we'd go to I remember going to birthday parties as a kid, and, you know, we'd be out at a farm there around Alexander City, and they'd have a brim pond just like you have out there at the Off Lodge, and we'd, you know, have ice cream and cake, and, you know, part of the deal was we'd go fish a little bit. Well, when it was time to go get cake and ice cream, I wanted to stay and fish. Everybody else, you know, normal kids, like, they're ready for cake and ice cream, but I just wanted to keep fishing. I was really fortunate to grow up on the lake as a kid, and I didn't realize how lucky I was. But there weren't a whole lot of other kids. You know, there's 2 or 3 of us in the neighborhood. But one of the things I did for fun, other than playing sports, when I wasn't playing sports, I was fishing around the bank, trying to catch anything that I could catch. And that's when I knew I love the challenge of interacting with nature and trying to figure out how to get a fish to bite, you know, and it was, when I was a kid, it was little bitty minnows. I remember one of the first tournaments I ever fished was a little one-day kids fishing deal. And it was the old Piney Woods Marina, which is gone on Lake Martin now. And I remember it like yesterday, out of all the fishing I've ever done. And walking around the bank, and I won the little kids fishing derby, catching little bitty minnows and little rock bass. And I was so excited, you know, as excited as I've ever been in any other tournament I've ever fished. And it's just something about that interaction and being able to get a fish to bite and feeling that pull on the end of the line. And a lot of times you can't see them. Most of the time you can't see them. So you don't know what's going to happen. And that's kind of the beauty of fishing, you know, every time you go out there is you never know what's going to happen. It's always something different, new sights, new sounds, new smells, new experiences. No 2 days are the same.
Well, that to me is what makes fishing the greatest sport there is out there, because of what you said. You can't see your opponent. Yeah. You get to go out there and try to catch and make moves off of something that you don't know if you're making the right move or the wrong move.
Right.
You've explained it in such a great way for people out there that are listening, this scientific process. At the same time, it's an art to understand what that fish doesn't have a professor brain out there. He ain't building rockets, but it's amazing how much money and time gets spent on this one little fish every year trying to figure out what he does. And then, you know, our podcast is a thing about special people doing special things, and it's obviously very special. You figured it out at an early age, how special fishing is to you and how much it drives you inside. And I know your story a little bit more than most people do. Tell us, I know that drive was so strong that you took that leap of faith and you quit your everyday job to go out there and fish this. Now tell us about quitting your job.
Still can't believe you just said that, but it happened. And I you know, played baseball in college in Montgomery at AUM, and you know, was trying to decide where I wanted to go with all of that. And you know, I knew I wanted to do something outside, and AUM had, you know, it was a couple of, to do biology, which is more of a pre-med thing, and I really wasn't into the pre-med because I don't have the stomach for it. So, you know, the other option was environmental science. And I thought, well, the way things are going, you know, environmental field, maybe I'll have a, you know, chance of doing, getting a good job in the environmental field somehow. And I did. And that led me to the Alabama Department of Environmental Management. After I got out of college, it was in Montgomery, state job. and really a dream job for somebody that loved the outdoors and being in the water and around the water. We were doing biological assessments on creeks, rivers, and lakes, and I was working out of a boat, half of the year, and for a kid that loved being in a boat, it was a dream job. But being an athlete and being a competitor, and from playing sports in school that there's something inside you that wants to compete. And so, tournament fishing for me was that perfect combination of, being in the outdoors, having that challenge of figuring out, fish, just like deer hunting, trying to figure it all out. But also, you're competing against other anglers. Once you get into the tournament, you're competing against the fish when you're fishing, but you're also competing against other anglers when you get in a tournament. And for me, that was just such a rush. It's hard to describe. And I remember it from the first tournament I fished with my dad, the first fish that I caught in a tournament. That feeling, that rush was just so much more elevated than it was. And for anybody that's ever caught a fish, they know how the thrill that you get from just catching a fish is so much fun. But, doing it in a tournament, for some reason, it was just such a rush. And I've never gotten tired of that. That's how I got into it. And so being a competitor and being driven and trying to push myself to see where the limit was, I started out with a bass club, the bass club that my dad was in. I was a kid growing up. I used to sit in the back of the meetings at Kalijah Bassmaster to do homework while my dad and his club members went through the club meetings and pairings and the whole, telling fish stories. And I was exposed to that then. So I got old enough, I joined the club and started fishing club tournaments. And best thing that ever happened to me, once I got out of college, I got a job. I could finally afford my own boat, bass boat. And so I ended up with a lemon. So I ended up with a boat that stayed tore up most of the year. And it was the biggest blessing because I ended up fishing most of the tournaments my first year as a non-boater in the back. So you could fish as a boater or a non-boater. So I ended up fishing with some of the veterans of the club, that were even older than my dad, that knew all these lakes around here. And it was I was frustrated because I didn't get to run my boat and do my own thing, but it was so cool to get to fish with those guys. And I learned a lot about the area lakes that we fished with the club, and went on to do well. And so I started fishing each level after that, BFLs, the club, federation, state championship, that kind of stuff, trying to qualify for it. And then moved on into the FLW once I did well in BFLs and the federation. I didn't win the state tournament that first year, but I made the state team. And that was probably the biggest move for me because I went on to make the federation championship. It's basically like the classic, the Bassmaster Classic for everyday club fishermen. And to give you an example, for anybody that follows fishing, that same federation championship, two of the others, there weren't many of us. There were only maybe 12 or 14 anglers. I can't remember. But out of those, it was me, but two others were Bill Lowen and Bobby Lane. And anybody that follows the professional fishing world will recognize those names as some of the top in the world, and they were at this tournament. So to get there, you had to be pretty dang good. Had to get through a lot of really good anglers to make it. Moving on from there, I got to when I really had to make the decision is when I started fishing what we call the Strin Series. Now it's the Toyota Series. It's changed names over the years. FLW was EverStart, Strin Series at the time that I fished it. That was a multi-day event, so multiple days of practice, multiple days of tournament. When you have a state job, you've got good leave time, but you don't have that much time. You get 2 weeks for the whole year. I was, another example, I was really fortunate because my supervisors allowed me to take leave without pay. And I didn't get paid a whole lot, so leave without pay from a state job doesn't leave you a whole lot to work with,
right?
Especially as a young couple with bills and everything. But I did that and fished, and I did good. So then that's what really led me to the dilemma of, is this it for me? Do I stay with the safe option, which is a great state job, doing what I love to do with good benefits? I'll have retirement. I know what I'm getting paid every month. To fishing for a living where you've got entry fees and expenses and chasing these fish that you can't see and going to a level of angling against anglers that each level you go up, it gets tougher. But we did it, and I probably wouldn't have, but Steph, my wife, Stephanie, mentioned, she was like, I think if we're going to try it, now's the time to do it. We didn't have kids at the time. Stephanie was working, so that was a huge help because that gave us a little financial backing if the fishing thing didn't work out, because you can dig a hole in a hurry, in angling, in professional angling. And so we tried it. We said, let's give it a year, maybe 2, and see what happens. And that was maybe 13, 14 years ago now, and I'm still doing it. Hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of times I've thought about that state job pretty hard, and in recent years, actually went so far as applied, to get back on with that job with the state, because I just felt I was at that point where I felt like I was spinning my wheels with my career. I was getting older. We've got Gage, who is 9 years old, and it's like your priorities change, and you start thinking, is this the best option going forward, or am I doing the best for my family and for me? And long story short, that's when the Major League Fishing option came along, and it's just been a huge blessing, to have the opportunity to move to Major League Fishing. Bassmasters was wonderful. FLW was wonderful. But that's what I needed at the time. I needed what the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour was offering, and it was just it was a different format. It was it was refreshing, and so we're rocking and rolling on the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour right now, having a good year. Right now with 2 tournaments left, so we'll see what happens.
Well, now a lot of our viewers out there that are listening are not huge bass fishermen or bass ladies,
right.
Not out there doing it. But kind of get us into the mental side of the game now of obviously you're outdoors. What are the physical and mental demands of somebody being on a boat?
I get a lot of people, because I love it so much, and I know, family and friends, I get asked pretty often, do you ever get tired of fishing? Because I go all the time. I'm on the road, long tournaments, long, week-long, 2-week-long trips. I get home and I get rested up a little bit. I'm ready to go fun fishing. I tell them I don't get tired of fishing. I do get tired from fishing. It's pretty demanding. To put it into perspective, some of our tournaments were $5,000 entry fees. Then you had another, and I'm speaking in terms of money, because I know most people out there, you got bills to pay, you have jobs, and you can relate to that. And so the stress comes from knowing I've got $6,000 or $7,000 tied up in this event, and of course there's a chance of winning $100,000 in these big events, but realistically, you're most of the time you're really just hoping to make a cut, and cut would be 10, so you're either losing 7 or making 3, and that's where the financial stress comes in a lot of times. But physically, you're out there on a practice day. We just had a tournament recently up north. A lot more daylight. You can practice daylight to dark. That was a 14.5-hour day on the water. As hard as you can go, because you don't leave anything on the table. It's competition. Your family, your sponsors, depend on your performance. And you don't want to cut it short. You want to give it everything you got, and it takes everything you've got. And you're not just out there, sitting down, riding on the boat. You're up and down, pulling the trolling motor. You're moving. You're trying to hit a lot of spots. If you get some bad wind, you're getting knocked around. I've had back trouble the last few years, so I'm reminded of all those bumps that I've hit over the years. But I love it, and that's why it's. I just get tired from fishing, so I don't even realize it really until I'm done. Until that tournament's over, I don't realize what I've put myself through physically or mentally. And when you go and you put that much into an event, and you come away with a good tournament, it makes it all worth it. It's rewarding. You've earned money. You've served your sponsors well. You're proud of what you've accomplished because you poured so much into it. And at our level of angling against this type of competition, if you finish in the top half of the field, it's kind of like a win. I know, Ricky Bobby said, if you ain't first, you're last.
That's right.
But I can tell you, I made a living off of, finishing the top half of the field. And when you're doing that against the level of competition that we have out there and their abilities, it's rewarding just to do well in an event, and to make a championship, it's a big deal. Well,
and to put it in perspective for a lot of people out there listening as well, you got a job just like everybody. Your hours are a lot longer. Mm-hmm. You spend, like you said, daylight to dark, but your office is outside. Like you don't get to sit in the air conditioning when you want to. When these storms blow up, you got to keep fishing if it's a tournament day, or if it's like you said, you're up north somewhere and it's cold or the snow blowing, you just still got to go fishing. Yeah. Now tell us also, to put it into people's mind, what is a day like of food for Greg Vinson? I mean, how do you nourish your body?
I eat terribly. I always
tell us what are we eating?
You're gonna hit me on the Snickers bars and Monster energy drinks. So I knew it was coming. Jim's a lot better about how he eats and takes care of himself than I am. I've learned over the years, to try to manage that, but it's tough. You eat a lot of fast food. I know all the fast food chains well, know the menus well, and it's not ideal. But when you're traveling to a tournament, I used the tournament in New York recently, for example. That's 2 days of driving. You just want to get there. You don't want to stop. And if you're going to eat well, you have to make a conscious effort to do that. And I have gotten better over the years. So a lot of times what we'll do if we can is we'll try to rent a place where we can cook. And that allows us to go and shop. So, we try to find a grocery store in the area. Right. Usually a Walmart, because we know our way around in there. Bradley Roy and I usually room together now. And I also have a great sponsor / friend / media guy that's been traveling with us, Kevin Crew, who's we've turned him into a part-time cook. And, so we're going to have to pay him a little better. But it's really, really been important for us to try to eat well, because your body just at some point, it just says, hey, you're not taking care of me, I'm not going to take care of you. That's that kind of thing. And after several days of grinding like that, if you're not eating and drinking right, it's going to catch up with you. So I have gotten better at that. I'm a lot better at managing, my tackle inside the boat than I am my eating habits, but it all ties in together.
Well, and that's one of the things I wanted to get into viewers' mind as well. Is, obviously the office is outdoors. You're doing a lot of physical activity every time you go to the office. You're not sitting there typing on a keyboard. Right. How many, if you were to put it into perspective for people listening, in a tournament day, how many casts do you feel like you make?
I've heard a few numbers, and it depends on the technique and all, but you're usually around 2,000 to 3,000 casts in a day.
Okay, and then we're going to deal with a 4-day tournament. So 2 times 4 to 8 to 10,000 casting up.
Yeah, it's a lot of casting, and
wow.
And the old wing reminds me that I've made a lot of casts every once in a while. But
that's what I was going to ask, is how, if you're doing 10,000 casts in a tournament, then you're coming home and fun fishing, you may be not out of the realm to say you make 500,000 casts in a year.
I'm not very good with math out of the top of my head. Yeah. I can cheat on my calculator, but it's a lot.
Yeah.
And you feel it, eventually, physically you'll feel it every once in a while, and you realize, and, it's like anything else over time, your body, you're taking a lot of hits, you're making a lot of casts, you're hitting a lot of waves out there. And, you're going back to the elements and being out in the elements. I've always been an outdoors person like you. I love being outside. That's where I'm most comfortable. Whether it's 95 degrees or, sometimes it's 23 degrees. If I can stand it, I want to be out there, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the challenge of the elements. Now, this time of year, I don't mind being in the air conditioning for a little while too, cooling off. But I like that. I like, preparing for the elements and figuring out how that's going to affect what I'm going to do from day to day. I think it's part of the outdoors. It's something, that's neat. I'm a part-time weatherman, because I'm constantly studying, the conditions and what we're going to be dealing with. Because one of the running jokes is, if you need rain in your area, just call the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour and we'll bring rain. It can be 3 months that you haven't had rain, and if we have an event scheduled, you're going to get some good heavy rain. So, yeah, it's just kind of a little running joke with us.
Well, now that we've kind of walked people down that road of what it's like being in the boat, we've kind of explained a little bit about how much you're putting on your body physically and mentally. There was a moment in time that something happened in between some of your tournaments at coming home that kind of maybe had a chance of derailing the whole thing. Tell us how that happened.
Yeah, there's you take things for granted. I think we all do, and when you're able to do certain things, on a daily basis, you take those things for granted. And I did that. And that's probably one of the reasons why early on in my career I didn't eat as well as I should, and didn't exercise as well as I should, because I just had always just been able to go out there and do it, Qualified, I had a really good year in 2015, qualified for the Bassmasters Classic. And that was the pinnacle, that's your goal every season, was to make a major championship. And I made it, had a good season. Things were going. I had kind of had a couple of off years after nearly winning the Bassmasters Classic, and then came back and had a couple of just kind of so-so years, Then to come back in 15 and go out there and catch them, that was pretty good, hey, I still got it, In the off season, I'm exercising, I'm fishing hard, I'm preparing. We got a classic coming up on, in Grand Lake in February. And long story short, we went out and ate with some friends. We were going to go watch a movie. And so, I don't remember the movie, and I'll explain why when we get to the end of the story. But at some point, I had to use the restroom terribly bad. And I was like, I don't, think I'll just wait, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go. So I stood up, and I felt a little, just a little queasy, just a little like sick, whatever, normal stuff or whatever. And I got to the restroom, and as I'm walking in, I start to feel this lightheadedness, and it was a feeling I had felt in the past, and had actually blacked out, a few years prior, maybe 4, 5, 6 years prior, where I'd had that same feeling and just blacked out all of a sudden. And I had that feeling, it's kind of like when you're, maybe it's some people are experienced, if you lean over and then you lean back up really quick, you kind of get a little lightheaded, but it comes back pretty quick.
Right.
And, but I had that feeling, but it was really strong. And I was like, I've got to get over here and sit down. And all I remember was turning to make a step, and I don't remember anything else except I remember waking up, and I remember some medical professionals. I don't remember paramedics, whatever they were. I remember them asking me my name, and I can barely remember I was able to answer that question. And I don't remember much after that, but I had blacked out. And what ultimately happened was, as I was trying to get to a place to kind of sit down and lean against the wall, I had just fallen like a tree. And I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3", 235 pounds. And, after we learned more, I basically fell straight back on my head onto on a bathroom floor. It's a hard tile floor. And I had a major concussion. Now, I'd had concussions in the past, playing sports, playing football. I had one. It scared me a little bit because I wasn't able to, I didn't really know where I was, things like that. I went to the hospital. This was, my teenage years. And, the next day I was, they kind of watched me, check vitals, all that. Next day I was fine, and I didn't have any other trouble. This one was totally different, and I ended up going back home, and I was, I'll say I was deathly sick, because I didn't realize that the symptoms I had were, I was very close to where people having similar concussions, have passed away, and I had those kind of symptoms, just, all night, just heaving and just terrible, nothing I'd ever experienced before. And actually learned of, somebody in our general area, a couple of weeks after that had a similar type concussion, similar symptoms, and passed away, right after, those symptoms I had. So, by the grace of God, I survived, through that. And I'm a like tough guy, the tough guy type, like I can beat anything. I'm like, so the next day I learned I've got a concussion. Last night was awful. I was sick, and I immediately go into fishing mode, and I'm thinking about the Classic coming up, in the next week or two. I'm like, well, I'm doing the math, kind of starting to do some math in my head, and I'm thinking, well, I've got, time to get over this and go fish the Classic, because I'd had that concussion before in high school, and I was over it, the next day or two or whatever, never had any other symptoms. And what I learned later on after getting the MRI and the CT scan, I think it was, when they looked, the type concussion I had, they compared it to severe concussions like people have experienced in a car wreck, and it really hit home when I went to see the neurologist, and he said, yeah, he's the one that told me about being similar to a car wreck. He said, the good news is that we won't have to, drill any holes in your head and relieve bleeding. You don't have any bleeding on the brain. And, it really hit home like how serious it was, what had happened. And it took a long time to get over it, and that was the biggest struggle for me, was trying to recover from that. Because in my mind, I'm thinking a day, 2 days, I'm back to normal. I'm out working on the yard. I'm out working on, I was building the building at the house we had just moved into. We were just selling our old house at the time. And it just went on and on and on, and I couldn't do anything, and that's when I realized, I couldn't stand up very long. I didn't have much strength. I'd get sick easy. I couldn't sleep at night. And that carried on for the rest of that year, where I fought symptoms. So I went on and I had a good friend. I was able to, I kind of fudged a little bit on how serious it was, because I didn't want to miss the Bassmasters Classic, just being honest. And I shouldn't have fished that tournament, but I wanted to fish just like a football player. When they get knocked out, they want to go back in the game.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot like that. And I was like, hey, I've had this serious concussion, word had gotten out. But I've got this guy that's going to come with me, and he's going to ride with me in practice. I had a good friend that came down, and we left my house in Wetumpka, headed for the Bassmasters Classic, and I had struggled to, piece tackle together and all that. And we made it to the bridge crossing the river between Montgomery and Prattville, and I remember thinking, I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think I'm going to make it. I just don't know if I can handle it, because I was getting sick and lightheaded and just crazy weird stuff, you're dealing with your brain.
Right.
And I ended up somehow getting through it. He drove all the way. I got there. We did a day of practice, and I did sleep in, which I never do, but I would sleep in, and I'd get up and take my time. And first day of practice went pretty good. I just was kind of going through the motions, and somehow ended up with this little crankbait that, that was working. And I was just, as long as I was standing up, and especially when it was cold, it seemed like I was kind of okay. I was tired, but I was making it. But then at night when we got in, I remember laying down, and the whole room was just spinning. The whole time the room was spinning, and it scared me. So,
oh, yeah.
And so one of the other symptoms I had were noises were like super amplified, and it's hard to describe. But I remember it's funny, how little of some of the just bits and pieces I remember from that tournament. But we went into a restaurant, and just normal restaurant sounds, waitresses moving dishes around, people talking, things like that. But for me, it was like somebody had it on a loudspeaker. And it was the weirdest thing. It was like dog hearing or something, where the loudest noise that you've ever heard would come from the dishes or something like that bumping together. And it was almost more than I could stand, to put it into perspective. Like, felt like I was going to have to leave. But made it through that tournament. And first day of the tournament, I'm in second place in the Bassmasters Classic. And, I'm like, wow, this might happen. Now, as it went on, the next day out, I didn't do as well. Not so much because of the injury, I don't think. But as that year went on, the symptoms and the problems that came from that concussion just kind of carried on. And, one of the things I had trouble with was trying to make a run in rough water, the bouncing around, shaking around, my body, my brain still trying to sync up, and remember not making a run to an area that I knew was really good, and made a conscious decision not to go there just because of the run, because I'd had some scary stuff happen during the season. Another tricky thing, I ended up developing real severe tendinitis. I'd never had a problem with it in my elbow. And I really think that following year, your brain and your body being able to work together and heal and adjust to all those demands that you had on your body during a tournament, all of a sudden, I don't think that was synced up right. And I developed real severe tendinitis, and that cost me a lot. So now you're talking, 2,000 or 3,000 casts a day, and you're not able to make a half of those, because of this tendinitis. So it was scary. I learned how close I was to dying.
Now,
really.
For people that have just heard this and understand, were there ever any explanations as to why you passed out?
There's some different opinions. So I talked to different doctors, different neurologists. The easy answer is no. One thing I remember, it could be hereditary. It could be, I thought it could be related to blood pressure. I've had real low blood pressure. A lot of people think, low blood pressure is good, but there's problems with that too.
Right.
And one of the things with that is your body being able to circulate and catch up. And long story short, I think, basically kind of in a reclined position for whatever reason, and the movie or whatever was going on, that, getting up quick seems to
trigger it.
Yeah, that maybe I think the blood has it can kind of pool in your legs, has trouble circulating in time, and your body just causes you to black out. And my dad had done that years ago. I remember as a kid, him doing it at least once, maybe twice.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's hard to predict. You
Right.
You go through your normal life, do everyday normal things, and then all of a sudden it hits you. The most important thing for me now is recognizing it, but I got to sit down now.
Right.
Not a second or 2 seconds from now. Like if I feel that, and fortunately I haven't blacked out since then, but I've had those feelings, been close, and I realized, hey, let's settle down and let everything catch up, I guess.
Right.
And
well, that's one of the reasons that we're doing the podcast today, is because this whole show again is about special people doing special things, and for you to have gone through what you did, of something you have no idea how it come upon you, and then to be able to recover, and then not just recover, but go back to a high level, and in some people's mind, even a higher level than you were before the injury in your fishing. And that's impressive in itself. Now, another special part of you, and we want to get people involved in and know what's going on, is we know that you do a lot of traveling, speaking to high school groups, to college kids, to really get them inspired out there, wanting to get into the sport. What makes that in your heart, to drive you to want to get the kids out there?
Oh, I just love the sport. I love what it's done for me, the joy that it's brought me. And, you learn a lot of life lessons from fishing. And, it's not always easy. Sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes the fish come off. Sometimes there's something you could do about it. Sometimes there's things you couldn't do about it.
Right.
And whatever that scenario is, your attitude towards that, can determine whether you go on to be successful or whether you just fall flat. And so that's something that I've learned from fishing, but it's just brought so much joy to me. I want to share that with others. I want them to get that experience. It's not for everybody. Everybody doesn't go out and love fishing the first time they try it. Some end up liking it later on. Some could care less and end up doing other things, but I think them having that opportunity to experience that is what's most important. If they didn't get that opportunity to try it, they'd never know what a special thing it could be for them. We've seen that with the kids with off.
Right.
I've seen it with teens. I've seen it with, high school, experienced anglers, getting to try, tournament fishing and things like that. And just looking back, looking at some of the people that I've been able to come in contact over the years through this sport, this journey for me as a professional angler wasn't planned by me. A lot of people come out of school and say, hey, I want to be a professional angler. Well, and they plan their life goals behind that. I was not that person. I didn't have that. That wasn't, I really didn't think that was an option for me. With my background, my financial situation, that was a higher plan. I honestly believe that. Too many of the right things have happened that have led me in that direction. And it's only fair to say that I was led in that direction for a purpose, and I try to, do my best to fulfill that. I fall short like we all do a lot of times, but I realize for some reason I was put into that position, and I don't think it was for me, and so that's the way I look at it. And as much as I enjoy it, as much as I get from getting to do what I love for a living, I think, being able to give back and share that passion with others and see them take off and grow in fishing is what's most rewarding in the end, and I've seen that with close friends. I've seen that with people I don't even know. And it's always special no matter who it is or the circumstances.
Right. Well, and that's, to me, again, another thing that makes what you do a very special thing is you feel fishing the love in your heart like nobody else. That's what separates you and makes you one of the best in the world. But then to be able to take that same momentum and that same heart, and I've watched you on a pond bank take a kid with special needs and sit over there and fish with them, and they catch a fish, and it's just like you caught your first fish.
It is.
Like you can see it.
I love it.
And I think that's one of the things that really separates you and your story from a lot of people in the world, and that's what makes it special. Now, one of the things we love to do in this podcast is to bring up things and kind of get people on the lighter side of stuff. Now, tell us something funny about Greg Vinson that people don't know.
I'm going to tell one that's, I'll let the viewers decide if it's funny. For me, it's embarrassing, but I'm going to share it. How about that?
All right.
So as a pro angler, one of the really cool things is that we get a new boat and equipment every year, and that's part of our. We have sponsors, and some of them are equipment, some of them are boats, and so at the end of the year, we sell our boat, and we're able to get another boat, which is awesome. I never imagined I'd get a new boat every year.
Right.
Can't tell you how cool that is. So in the process of selling my boat, I'd put the ad out like you would for any other boat, and someone contacted me. It's a pretty high-end boat, so it takes a special person that's ready to spend that kind of money on a boat.
Right.
I think the guy was from Indiana. He came down. I was gonna try to make the drive a little easier, and said, "Hey, I'll meet you up here in Decatur, Alabama. We'll take the boat out, try it, run it on Lake Wheeler. I'll show you how everything works, so you'll feel good about it. If you like it, you can buy it. You can take it with you, all that good stuff." So we met up and we go out, and it's kind of cool. It's I think it's April, late March, April, something like that. Still, water's still a little cool. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to show him, how the boat rides and how fast it is, because everybody buys a bass boat. They want to go fast,
Right.
So I'm like, I get it up and I'm running pretty quick. And so one of the things was how well the boat would turn. And, making tight turns if you're running a river, running into a slough or something, an object, and you're trying to dodge it. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to show this guy how good the boat will turn, I did something that I never do in real life, and that's where I messed up. So I was like, told him to hold on, and I'm going to show him how hard this thing will turn. And I turned it really sharp. And when I did, the front end of the boat just dug into the water, and I went over the console, and he bounced across the front deck. This is the guy that I'm selling the boat to. So,
oh my God.
And so, I laugh about it now because everybody was okay, but that was a terrible decision, one of the worst decisions I've ever made on my part, one of the dumbest things I've ever done. But it's funny because there's this guy that I'm wanting to sell the boat to, and I have just thrown him out into the Tennessee River in end of March, and the water's
freezing.
Cool. And it was cold because I remember catching my breath. Thank goodness we had our life jackets on. That's why you wear a life jacket. You never know what'll happen.
Right.
I get back in the boat. I get him in the back in the boat. I'm expecting, one of us to be hurt. Neither one of us were hurt other than just getting bruised up a little bit, because I was going fast when I made this turn. I mean, this was a long time ago, early in my career, and I was young and dumb, put it that way.
Right.
We get back. I don't know how we got dried off. I mean, I didn't bring extra clothes. I don't remember what I did, but he bought the boat. I just knew I had just drove all the way up to the Tennessee River and
for no reason
messed this whole thing up, and he loved it. You
Wow.
know, he bought the boat, so that was the good part of the story. My phone got drenched. I had to go buy a new phone to get, to head back home up there around Decatur. And
so don't you know he's sitting at home right now with the greatest story. He got to meet a Bassmaster Pro that threw him out of the boat.
I'm sure every time I've been on television and on live several times lately, and I'm sure if he's watching, he's like, there's the guy that threw me out of the boat when he was trying to sell it to me.
That pointing you out to his buddies.
Yeah.
Now,
don't ride with that guy.
This is going to be one of those questions, and I know because it's another reason that makes you very special that you have this memory that you can remember every fish you've ever caught from being a little kid to last week in the professional tournament. Give us the best fish catch Greg Vinson's ever had.
Oh man, there's been so many, and
yeah, but I mean, just
there's been bigger ones. It's hard to come up with one, but I'm thinking through a whole bunch of them right now. And so I was going to mention the first fish that I caught, with my dad in the first tournament we fished. I remember that. Caught it on a spinnerbait. We're fishing a brush pile that was right around old Pleasure Point Marina.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember catching it. It counted. We kept it. It counted towards our limit, and I just felt so cool. But ultimately, the first year that I made the decision to go full time, and I fished the String Series at the time, true professional event, multi-day event against top level pros in the mix, that kind of thing.
Right.
On Lake Okeechobee. The first day I've got 10 minutes left to fish before I head back. So I start flipping really quick down this bank, just trying to get lucky. I feel a bite. I was moving so quick that the boat was halfway by it by the time I leaned on it, and I hooked this fish in a mat, and it's gator grass. So this stuff, gator grass, is kind of like kudzu. If you can imagine kudzu, how hard it is and thick.
Mm-hmm.
So the fish is underneath, and it's thrashing around, throwing water everywhere. And I know it's a big one, but I don't know how big. And the guy with me, and it got to the point where I was like, I can't pull this fish through because I can't break. These vines are too tough. I can't break the fish through there. What am I going to do? So I tell my co-angler, at the time we could use nets, and I was like, hey, just run the net up. I said, I'm going to pull the fish up against the mat, and you just run the net up under there and try to pin him to the mat and see if we can get him. And he's, and he's digging for the net, and the fish is just throwing water everywhere. And he gets the net underneath it, and I think it's in there, but I don't know. And he kind of slides the net out, and we see we've got this big old literally black bass in there. It's come out of Tannic water in Florida. And he starts to lift the net out of the water, and the fish just keeps coming and keeps coming. Long story short, it was a 10-pounder. My first 10-pounder of my life, first ever professional event, first day. And I think maybe that was a good omen, or maybe God's message that, this is going to
It's going to work out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And man, when I was running back for weigh-in that day, I just felt like I was floating on air.
Wow.
It's like I couldn't feel anything. I was so excited.
That's pretty neat.
That's probably one of the biggest ones.
That's really neat to have an opportunity to catch a 10-pounder, but to catch it in a tournament.
Yeah.
I mean, for people out there listening, you don't understand how big of a level that is to catch a 10-pounder. I mean, that's amazing.
It was it was such a rush, and so I won't ever forget that one. And it was huge. It helped me get a good check, which I needed really bad. I got big fish, I think, in the tournament. So that helped too, and that was a big boost at the time for me.
Now, to put people in perspective with Greg, where are we headed next? What's the future look like for Greg?
So we're about to go down to ICAST, which is the biggest trade show in fishing, and they got everything you can imagine and then some, because everybody brings out all their new stuff.
Right.
And you got trolling motors, electronics, baits galore, fishing lines, rods, reels, apparel, rain gear, anything you can imagine in the fishing industry. Anybody in the fishing industry pretty much will be at ICAST, as far as manufacturers and things like that, companies, and it's a really cool deal because you get to see all the new stuff. After ICAST, I'll come back home a couple of days. That's in Orlando, Florida. Steph and Gage are going to go with me. They're going to Universal while I'm working
the show.
While I'm talking fishing. So that'll be fun. We're going to hit Cape Canaveral a day or two before we come home together. And then I'm headed off to Lake Champlain in upstate New York. So within about a week's time, I'm going to be going from Orlando to upstate New York, basically the Canada border. And we're going to be fishing for some of those awesome New York smallmouth. And we've got 2 tournaments left. I'm in good shape in the points, so this will be a big one. But it's pretty nice this time of year.
Oh, yeah. Nice weather.
If you live in
up there.
Alabama this time of year, the heat and humidity, about the time you really start to get burned out on it. We have one on the schedule. We get to go to New York. Usually that's pretty fun.
Well, that sounds like fun to get up and see something different.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful, and we just came back from upstate New York. So we went upstate New York, going to Florida for ICAST, back to upstate New York for another one. Put a lot of miles on the old Ford.
Now tell us, for everybody out there listening, so we can get people onto your page, tell us, how do we get in touch with Greg Vinson if they want to? And I know I don't want to give out cell phone numbers and blow your phone up, but tell us, do we have Facebook, Instagram?
Yeah.
Give us our social media, how to get you.
Yeah, just look me up. So on Instagram, it's Roosterfish.
Okay.
RUSTER fish. The nickname Rooster comes from this beautiful red hair that I got.
Okay.
I know everybody's envious, but it'll be all right. But yeah, that's Roosterfish on Instagram, then Greg Vinson Fish on Facebook.
Okay.
Just check me out. There's 2 different pages. I've got a personal, then I've got another one that's dedicated more towards what's going on now. So you can probably check out both, and you'll see the one that we're posting a lot of videos from the tournaments, tips and techniques, but just what's going on out there in the world of Greg Vinson on the road, and pretty cool stuff.
Do we have a website?
Yep, it's gregvinson.com.
Okay.
So easy to find, and you can pretty much contact me through any of those. If you got a fishing question or just anything, I don't. I'm not great, on getting back real quick, but I will get back with you and be glad to try to help. And we do that a lot. Get a lot of questions. Hey, what do I throw on this type of lake, or hey, what's life like as a pro angler? All that different stuff.
Gotcha. Now, last thing, YouTube. You got a channel out there people can go watch videos?
Yeah, check it out. It's under Greg Vinson. I don't know if there's another Greg Vinson out there on YouTube, but
right.
When you see the fishing stuff, that's going to be me.
Okay.
So, yeah, check us out on YouTube.
So we want to make sure everybody out there that's listening's got a way to get a hold of Greg. If you want him to come speak, at your youth group or your high school fishing team, I'm sure he's open to do those type of things. Yeah. What about sponsors? Before we get out of here, tell us some sponsors.
Oh, I hate to list all of them.
Okay.
I'll say what I'd like for people to do, if you're interested, is check them out on my website. I've got the whole list there, and I couldn't do, this fishing business is pretty tough sometimes, and I couldn't do what I do without having great sponsors, and I've got some great relationships. I do have one right here on my shirt, Phoenix Boats. Has been awesome to me. Great folks, but so many other good ones, and I hate to
leave somebody out.
I hate to leave somebody out. I'd rather, if everybody will take a look, we've got them on the website. And if you're interested in their stuff, be glad to send me one of those questions, and we'll tell you all about it, and how to use it or what it's good for, or anything you can ask. Be glad to.
Well, before we get out of here, as we do with everybody that comes on the show, we want to give you our signature question for the podcast. If tomorrow was your last day and Greg Vinson's number was called and we wrote a book, or we got to read the book, The Life of Greg Vinson, what would you hope people read?
You mentioned that earlier, and people have kind of asked, or I've thought about it and been asked occasionally. And it's a complicated question, but the more I think about it, I think, I could give a simple answer. And there's a quote, I had to look up who it was from. It's Abraham Lincoln. It says, "Whatever you are, be a good one." And we carry so many titles in our lives. I'm a fisherman. I'm also a dad. I'm a husband. I'm a friend. I'm a brother. I'm an uncle.
Right.
So many other titles, whatever you do for your work. So whatever title it is that I carry in life now or later on, I hope when I'm done, people say it was a good one. And one of the most important out of all of those is, I'm a Christian. And like I said, we all fall short, and I do from time to time. But when all is said and done, I hope, people say he was a good one.
Wow. Well, then that's about as well put as it can be. You know, everybody hopes at the end that they're a good one. Well, we want to say thank you for coming on and hanging out with us today. Yeah. And we really enjoyed getting the opportunity to meet you and understand a little bit more about your story. And hopefully, I know this fishing career is headed for big things. So hopefully when you go out and win the Major League Fishing Red Crest and become the champion, you'll come back on and talk about it.
I will.
All right.
I will. Now you got to sign your book for me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
all right.
That's next on the agenda.
Well, all right. Well, thank you for coming and hanging out with us.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for
having me.